April was an historic month from an astrological perspective, with a conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in the first degree of the zodiac. Something that hasn't happened since 4360 BC at what is seen by many as the dawn of civilization itself. The conjunction of April was given extra power because it came just 3 days after a solar eclipse in Aquarius. So this was historic astrology, and reality is obliging with historic events. The old world order is disintegrating before our eyes. Saturn-Neptune conjunctions are signatures of disillusion. With the release of 3 million Epstein files, many of those paying attention are being stripped of their illusions about reality. So-called conspiracy theorists are being proven to have been broadly correct about many of their long-held convictions. And frankly, I think the word apocalyptic is appropriate for describing what we're seeing right now. This is the revelation of the presence of evil in the highest echelons of society. Or perhaps it would be better to say the lowest. I discussed the Epstein files in this recent video, and I'll be going much deeper on them in a live stream taking place at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, April the 27th. It's called Jeffrey Epstein and the End of Casistocracy. You can purchase direct entry on the live streams page of my website, or by signing up as a member on that website, or by signing up here as a member on YouTube at correspondent tier. As S.J. Anderson and I discussed in this recent video, Saturn-Neptune conjunctions have historically seen the roll-out of important new technologies. In the case of this one of those technologies seems to be AI agents, essentially AI bots that do things for you rather than just talk. Aries is the martial sign of action. So, I think this fits rather perfectly. That said, I think this technology is clearly being overhyped by all the guys on Twitter going on about how it's going to automate everyone's jobs. I doubt that honestly, but I imagine agents will come to be seen as significant down the line. We've also seen a clear shift in energy in the air following the move of Saturn and Neptune from Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac, to Aries the first. One of the most obvious manifestations of that is the big reaction that's clearly building in the world right now against globalism and multiculturalism. We're seeing the emergence of much more nationalist and nativist movements are pushing back against open borders policies all over the place. For example, on April the 13th in the UK, we saw the launch of the Restore Britain Party led by Robert Lowe MP. This party explicitly aims to try to reverse the mass immigration policies that have been pushed by the British Uni-Party in recent decades. But this kind of thing is happening everywhere now. I've also talked many times on the show about how conjunctions of Saturn and Neptune have coincided with milestones in UFO history. For example, in 1989, the figure of Bob Lazar emerged, popularizing the idea that the U.S. was working to reverse-engineer crash UFOs at Area 51. In 1952 came the infamous sources over Washington mass UFO sighting. And in 1917 came the miracle of the sun in Fatima, Portugal. And what happened in April? Well, I've long been arguing that the period of 2026 and 2027 is going to see something resembling UFO disclosure. In an interview in April, former President Barack Obama was asked if aliens were real. He said this: "They're real, but I haven't seen them. And they're not being kept in, what is it? Area 51. Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States." Obama soon walked back the claims, which weren't particularly strong anyway. But when Donald Trump was asked about Obama's comments, he said the following: "Well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that." This is a lot more interesting because if this was classified information, then there clearly is something to classify. And then Trump posted the following on Truth Social: "Is Trump going to make an historic announcement about UFOs in the coming weeks or months? Certainly possible." And it's interesting that Obama made that statement just beforehand. Was he trying to beat Trump to the punch? Or is this some kind of scheme to have bipartisan messaging on the same subject? Whatever Trump says about UFOs, a lot of people aren't going to believe him. Is that part of the plan? And you can't help but suspect it's no coincidence that this is happening at the same time that the Epstein files are revealing the true nature of the globalist casistocracy that we're living under right now. The other question is this: are these things related? Some suggest they are. Watch this space. We've also seen a massive eruption of violence in Mexico following the killing of El Mino, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, by Mexican special forces. Members of the cartel have unleashed a wave of violence across 20 of the country's states. The killing came at the time of a violent and unpredictable square between Mars and Uranus, which is conjunct the fixed star Algol. That star, the Medusa's head, is a signifier of decapitation. And here we've seen the figurative beheading of the cartel. The supposed attempted assassination of Donald Trump in July 2024 came at a Mars-Uranus conjunction on this same start. And finally, there's Iran, which seems like it's on the verge of being attacked by the United States, which has built up a vast array of military assets in the region. There is negotiating leverage or in preparation for an attack. At the time I'm putting this video together, that attack hasn't happened yet, but it does look imminent. Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, is supposedly making plans in case of his own assassination. There's that decapitation theme again. We'll talk more about Iran later in this video. Alright, let's get into the astrology of April. This is World Astrology Report. I'm your host, Dan Waits, and welcome to another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. We're into April in the thick of eclipse season following the solar eclipse in Aquarius on April the 17th. On April the 3rd, we'll see a total lunar eclipse in Virgo. This will be a so-called blood moon eclipse where the moon will turn red. A lunar eclipse is essentially a very powerful full moon, and so it always implicates two signs due to the opposition between the sun and moon that implies. In the case of a lunar eclipse in Virgo, we primarily see the effects in terms of Virgoan themes like discrimination, analysis, and service. But the themes of the opposing sign of Pisces are also brought into the picture. The Piscean realm is oceanic. It's universal in scope, profound in feeling, and it lacks boundaries. While solar eclipses tend to have to do with leaders and matters of state, lunar eclipses speak to general conditions and things that affect the general population. This eclipse will see the culmination or revelation of impulses that were seeded in the past. The ruler of the eclipse is a retrograde Mercury in Pisces. The messenger is in poor condition here. I think this eclipse could bring technical breakdowns and communication problems. What's more, its meaning and the true shape of events may be difficult to discern. Now, let's think about what this eclipse will bring in the worldly sphere. First, let's look at our astromap, which shows where in the world the eclipse will be on the all-important angles when it goes exact. Now, if we zoom in, the line goes right through Switzerland, which is traditionally associated with the sign of Virgo. What's more, the eclipse is hitting the natal chart of Switzerland, which has its sun in Virgo in several key points. So, what does this mean for Switzerland? Well, eclipse has come into effect in advance of their actual appearance. And I think that may have happened here because we have seen a significant development in Switzerland recently that I think strongly reflects the symbolism of this Virgo-Pisces lunar eclipse. It has to do with the people, which is a lunar concern. In mid-April, it was announced that Switzerland will hold a vote in June on whether to restrict the population of the country to 10 million people. This would essentially require ending net immigration into the country. Here we see a proposal to set a technical limit. Think Virgo. But this limit will affect the issue of immigration and particularly open border policies, which are Piscean. Some other countries I think will be in the news around this time include Turkey, another Virgo country whose chart is also getting stimulated by this eclipse. And I'm also going to be looking to Poland, which is also implicated. I'm thinking that there could be events that have military implications for that country since the eclipse is landing right on its Mars at the mid-heaven of its chart, but there's something else I need to raise here, which is the possibility of a US-Israeli attack on Iran, which is looking imminent right now. Again, as I said in this video, it looks to me like Iran will indeed find itself in conflict this year. There are claims on social media that such an attack might be timed for the Jewish festival of Purim, which celebrates a Jewish victory in ancient Persia, aka Iran. Purim takes place on April the 2nd and 3rd this year at the time of this blood moon eclipse. I'm not sure if that's what's going to happen, but I think it's certainly possible given that the Aries ingress chart seems to point to war for Iran. But there's something else. Here's the natal chart for Israel. It has Mars, the war planet, at 28 degrees of Leo. In April, the solar eclipse at 28 Aquarius activated this Mars placement, suggesting the potential for more war. But transiting Mars last hit this degree on June the 14th of 2025, which is almost exactly when Israel last attacked Iran, later with help from the US. The Mars return signifies the beginning of the Mars cycle for an entity. So I think this tells us that confrontation with Iran is baked into this Mars cycle for Israel. At the end of April, Mars triggers the eclipse point and opposes Israel's natal Mars. It will still be close to that point by the time of this Purim festival. So, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see conflict around the time of this blood moon eclipse. Alright, let's move on and talk about something more pleasant. Jupiter. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do show it some support by clicking that like button down there and subscribing to the Point Taken channel and even enabling notifications. It all helps. Thanks, friend. On April the 11th, Jupiter will station direct at 15 degrees of Cancer. Jupiter entered Cancer on June the 9th of 2025. So, we've almost seen 9 months of this transit so far. And once Jupiter stations direct, it'll start its final run out of that sign. Now, Jupiter is strong in Cancer. This is its sign of exaltation. This gives it considerable power to do what it wants to do. And what it wants to do is bring coherence, stability, growth, and expansion and bring people together. Now, Cancer represents one of the 12 whole sign houses of your natal chart. You'll probably have noticed that that part of your life that the house represents has seen some growth and blessings even over the past 9 months. Perhaps Cancer is your 8th sign house and you've seen gains from investments or shared resources. Or perhaps it's your 5th and you've watched your children thrive during this period. Now, since November the 11th, Jupiter has been retrograde in Cancer and thus less inclined to offer its usual blessings. The Jupiter retrograde brings consolidation and processing of what was earlier provided. But that process comes to an end with Jupiter's direct station. This is particularly good news for anyone with placements in the middle degrees of the water and cardinal signs. Jupiter is also the planet of truth, faith, and gnosis. I think it's fair to say that with the release of the Epstein files, Jupiter and Cancer has brought us a little closer to the truth of what's going on in this world right now. But all exalted planets have weaknesses in that they tend to behave with a certain level of arrogance and lack the well-rounded balance that planets in domicile have. Jupiter and Cancer has brought people together. It's good at rallying people under a flag of identity. But that can come at the cost of a hardening against those outside it. Still, there are times when members of a family really do need to rally together and support each other, especially when nobody else will. Jupiter will be stationing direct very close to the Sun of the United States Sibley chart, which is at 13 Cancer and in a square to President Donald Trump's Jupiter. I think it's likely that we'll see Trump making grand statements around this time. Trump grand statements, surely some mistake. Alright. I mean even grander statements than usual. Perhaps he'll be trying to rally people around the flag or declaring victory or some kind of success or talking about aliens again. Alright, that's enough Jupiter talk for now. Let's move on to the second of this month's lunations, a new moon in Pisces. On April the 19th comes a new moon at 28 degrees of Pisces. This is an interesting lunation in that it's the first taking place in Pisces after Saturn and Neptune have finally left that sign for good. So, Pisces is going to be a different place from now on. It's been the locus of so much energetic focus recently, particularly in the last 3 years or so since Saturn entered that sign. Saturn's transit through Pisces has brought a process of pressurization and crystallization and differentiation applied to the Pisces whole sign house of our charts. Maybe you tried to build something. Maybe you came under pressure. Maybe you took on a burden. Whatever it was, that's finished now. But nothing ever really finishes. Every moment in time merely sets up the next one. So, this new moon will bring the planting of a new seed, a new impulse, a new dynamic in the Piscean realm. What's interesting with this moon, though, is that it's pretty close to Neptune and Saturn. So, it's going to be carrying some of the flavor of that conjunction. That conjunction has been about disillusionment and the composting of old structures. The movement of those planets into Aries, though, has brought a collective sense of awakening to go along with those disappearing illusions. Sun in Aries is saying that it's now time for action and to test ourselves and our willpower based on new convictions. So this lunation brings fresh seeds that somehow tie together that Piscean story with the new Aries story, linking the quest for truth with the need for action. The moon is appearing in the second last degree of Pisces at the end of the zodiac, which brings a sense of going for broke, pursuing dreams and seeking happy endings. There's a trine from Jupiter, the ruler of Pisces, here. So I think it's worth dreaming big here. The moon also enjoys a tight sextile with Uranus. So expect themes of sudden inspiration, authenticity, invention, and technology to be woven in with the events of this moment. Alright, let's move on. Right after this lunation at the end of Pisces, the Sun transitions into Aries, bringing the start of the astrological year. On April the 20th, the Sun makes its ingress into the sign of Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. By casting a chart for this moment in the capital of a particular country, the mundane astrologer can make yearly forecasts for that place. In the bonus section of this video, we look at the Aries ingress charts for a variety of countries including Iran, Israel, the UK, US, China, and Russia, and we make some predictions for the year to come. But here, I just want to offer some general observations that aren't based on house placements of the planets. So, I've cast this chart using the zero Aries house system without any angles. What we can see here is that there are 5 planets in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. This is the war planet Mars's bold, pioneering, fast-moving, action-taking cardinal sign. Among these planets are the Sun and Moon holding Saturn, Neptune, and Venus between them. The Sun and Moon are still in their new moon phase, which indicates that something is meant here in this year, something bearing the signature of Aries. If we use the 90-degree dial, which allows us to see the midpoint structures present here, we can see that the Sun is at the midpoint of Jupiter and Mars, which are in a harmonious trine configuration in the 360 degrees chart. Mars and Jupiter in combination is the signature of the crusader of fighting for faith or for principle. The Sun is also closely conjunct mystical Neptune and more distantly Saturn. There's a lot going on here, but just speaking more intuitively, the sense I get is it's signifying the emergence into world consciousness of a spiritual battle, one of good against evil. The recent release of the Epstein files has confirmed the worst long-held fears of conspiracy theorists, which is that the world is governed from the shadows by transnational and highly malevolent forces. The predators and sociopaths and PDF files that are ruling our societies are trying to use bureaucracy, control of global finance, technology-driven mass propaganda, and lawfare to build a global slavery system. It's incumbent upon all of us to understand this and to do our part to fight it. That's what I think the story of the coming years will be about, and that's what I see in this Aries ingress chart. Another way to put this is that we're in the early stages of a global war for sovereignty. This will play out at the national level, but also at the level of every individual. If that feels like a lot, and I can understand that, remember, we're not alone. There are far more of us than there are of them, and I think we can win. Alright, we're not quite done with April. There's one last thing that I want to tell you about. On April the 28th, Saturn and Pluto form an exact sextile aspect. This is important because it marks the first major aspect of their current cycle. That cycle began with a conjunction on January the 20th of 2020, which brought the COVID-19 pandemic. In the mundane sphere, Saturn and Pluto bring life and death situations, the empowerment of the state, and extreme limits and restrictions to life. They bring structures that seek to manipulate and control the hidden forces that underlie reality. Now, the Saturn-Pluto sextile goes exact on April the 28th. It's already in effect now, and it will continue to be so at least through May of 2026. The sextile will take forward the themes that were established in the world during the cycle seed period, i.e. the pandemic. Look out for governments introducing new laws or initiatives that take forward the impulses of that great 2020 power grab. Then think about the themes of biotechnology, corporate state and bureaucratic empowerment, mass mind manipulation, and the restriction of basic human freedoms. If we see an upsurge in armed conflict, whether in the Middle East or in Ukraine or both or anywhere else, we might see the introduction of new structures of control that's supposedly necessary for national security. It's going to be important to pay close attention to what's emergent at this sextile because it will clue us in to where the Saturn-Pluto cycle is taking us. The next big aspect is going to be the square in 2028. I also think this cycle has to do with US-China relations. So pay close attention to what happens here. I'm thinking that that square in 2028 could bring a significant deterioration. Alright, that's almost it for this video. In the bonus section that follows for members of World Astrology Report, we cast the Aries English chart for the US, UK, China, Russia, Iran, and Israel. Thanks for watching and see you again on the Point Taken channel very soon.